A wise man once said, I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do. So therefore, I'm going to help you out with the distance formula and midpoint formula. Shout out Office fans. Okay, so both these are more or less, since they're formulas, if you can remember to plug in the numbers in the right spots, they're relatively simple, and I'm going to show you, I'm a fan of Desmos. I'm going to show you kind of how I would type them in there, and then what that'll look like basically. So the first one is the distance formula. So I somehow already made a purple dot up there, but our distance formula usually we'll see d for distance equals, and then we're going to have a big square root, and then underneath we're going to have the difference in our x's, x2 minus x1. Technically it doesn't really matter, but I usually do the leftmost point as my x1, y1, and my rightmost point as x2 and y2, but it technically doesn't really matter. And then plus y2 minus y1, as long as you subtract the y's, subtract the x's, got that big square root over top of them. So as long as you can put those points in the correct spots, plug it in, should spit back a distance. For example, this line segment right here, unless we start breaking out some Pythagorean theorem or something like that, and you may notice for those who are well versed in that this is kind of just a rearrangement of Pythagorean theorem in a way. But not easy to just count the points when our segment is not like straight up and down or side to side or something like that. So we can use this formula. We do need the coordinates. So like I said, I like to use the leftmost point, so this one as my x and y1. So that's going to be a -5, 3. So just for my own benefit, I'm going to mark that as -5, 3. And the second one, -2, -3. -2, -3. And now I'm going to show you how I would plug it into the Desmos calculator, but you could write this out on paper and do it by hand. You could plug it in handheld calculator. It doesn't really matter to me, at least. So first, in these spots, I need an x2 and an x1. So just before we leave this, let's label that that's my first x, that's my first y, that's my second x, whoops, x, handwriting's hard on here, that's my second y. So I'm going to have a -2 minus a -5. So over on Desmos, I already have it kind of typed in here. The second one we'll use in a minute. I already have kind of a template, so like a setup version with no numbers in it yet. So square root symbol, and then here and here's my x's, right there, and right there is going to be my y's. So let me double check. It was a -2, because that's my x2, minus -5. So -2 and -5. Notice we have a double negative there, so it's going to be like addition. If you were doing it by hand, you would know to add those. And then my y2 and y1, so that's a -3 and a 3. -3 and 3. And all of a sudden it spits back our distance there. So let me find my tab here. There we go. So notice it gave us like a decimal there. It depends, on rounding and stuff like that, fractions. I usually assign delta maths, and it usually tells you on there what to do, but I would write it probably as 6.7, but if they specify they don't here, then go to that decimal point. So roughly 6.7. So that's all you're doing. 2, something like this, not going to do the whole thing, but in my opinion easier because it just gives you the points. You don't have to find them off the graph. So it takes kind of one step out of it, but then it's the same exact thing. You would go here, you would clear your spots, and obviously pause this or go back and pause it if you need that answer, kind of what it looked like or anything like that. And then you would just plug those numbers in instead. I would say make sure, like I did up here, I would label those. And just labeling, I stress it just because I've seen a lot of algebra students in the past make little silly mistakes because they try to go fast and they're just like first spot, second spot, third spot, and it, we jumbled up and then it doesn't give you the correct answer. So that is the distance formula. Let's see if I can close out here. And then, can we get to midpoint? Let's see. Oh, you're gonna make me scroll all the way. Let's go here. Un momento. Whoops. Distance and midpoint formula. Here we go. Got it back. Don't know why it wasn't letting me scroll down before, but we're here now. So midpoint formula, in my opinion, is the easier one, especially if you remember taking like an average of two numbers in a prior class, maybe algebra or middle school math. To find the midpoint, which we talked about with segments, we know it's just directly halfway between two coordinates. So essentially what we're doing is we're just going to average the two x's and average the two y's to find what sits directly in the middle. That's our new x and y. So what that looks like, I think it's this drawing tool that's freezing my screen a little bit, but that's all right. So what this looks like is going to be a coordinate this time instead of a single number. So I'm going to set it up like a coordinate. And I have two x's and two y's, so if I'm taking the average, both are going to get divided by 2. You're going to add your two x's together, so x1 and x2. You're going to add your two y's together, so y1, y2. So what that would look like for, say, number 4 here is my x's, so the 7 and the 9 get added together. So 7 and 9 get added together. I'm going to leave it written out for right now instead of simplifying, just so you can see. And my y's get added together, so a -5 plus a -1, which we would know kind of like subtraction. And those two numbers are your new x and your new y. So just to show in Desmos what that would look like, that's the second one here. I already have just two blanks added together divided by 2, so my first part was a 7 and a 9. So your new x value is an 8. Oops. So we could say the x portion of this new coordinate is an 8. And -5 and -1 were the y's. So I just go back and change this to a -5 and a -1. In the middle of those is a -3. That's my new y. So that coordinate, dishwasher's still going. That coordinate is the midpoint of these two coordinates. So if you drew it out on like a graph and graphed those, this one would be in the middle. Let's see, let's close that here. Basically, this is just going back to what we were doing before with midpoints, with the idea that we know the two midpoints, or the midpoint splits it in half, so these two must be equal, and you can set them up and solve algebraically. So I think we've covered most of that. I just want to touch on this word bisects. Think of that kind of like a midpoint for splitting a line. A midpoint is a point. A line bisects. It cuts it in half. So this line N cuts QR in half, just like a midpoint of P would. So don't really think too much more of that. It's also another word for like cutting it in half, except it's what a line does, not a point. Okay, hopefully this one was helpful. I was kind of all over the place with my resources here, but hopefully that helps. We'll see you guys.